Hi everyone, welcome to Brothers, Sisters, Strangers. I'm Ali John Chaudhary, psychotherapist, and I'm here today with Fern. And today we have a very important episode. We're going to be talking about social media and sibling estrangement. It's a topic that's very prevalent nowadays. We see a lot of this stuff going on online, and we've got a lot to say about it. We're going to be getting into it right away. I know, Fern, you've got some stuff that you'd like to share.
Well, my book launch is getting very close. I am the author of Brothers, Sisters, Strangers, Sibling, Estrangement, and the Road to Reconciliation. And I actually have a chapter in that book about social media because it is so complicated for those of us who are estranged. The book will be coming out in April, just in time for National Siblings Day. So I'm going to look forward to talking to you about that the next time we get together.
Absolutely. I think that's going to be very important that we do an episode on the book because I've read it and it's a great book, and people must be asking themselves, well, what's in it? What's it about? And we'll certainly expand next time on that for sure. So yeah, so basically I know that I know you've got some things you'd like to bring up with regards to some examples that you've seen with regards to social media. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I actually included this story, Ali John, in my book. And in the deepest moment of this decades-long sibling estrangement with my brother, and you have to recognize I hadn't talked to him. I've hardly seen him except at maybe a funeral or a wedding here and there, and we kept our distance at those occasions. I get an indicator on Twitter that my brother, or at least someone with his name, is following me. Well, it didn't include the picture of him. Of course, I might have not recognized him. It had been so long since I'd seen him. But anyway, I looked at this and I thought, is that my brother reaching out? It was so confusing to me. And I went and looked at his profile. And while his picture wasn't there, all the tweets were about the NFL. So I knew I had the right guy. It was my brother, and it was like a smoke signal that he was still alive after all these months and years of never hearing from him. And then I had this really interesting reaction, which was I got really angry because I suddenly realized I was not even worthy of following on Twitter. I was not even worthy of becoming a Facebook friend. And it really underscored how divided we were, and it was painful.
You know, you're right. I think that the whole theme of exclusion really gets played out well, I think, in social media. And I mean, you just brought up a very important example of the pain that that can cause. And I think that that's something that, you know, is important for us to realize whenever we're going on social media, that it's not always a pleasurable experience. You know, it could also be very condescending. It could be, you know, it could be undesirable. It could bring up some negative ruminations and such, you know. I mean, I think that that's something that a lot of us go through all of a sudden. It's like we post something, and then all of a sudden we have a brother or sister all of a sudden say they like some of the stuff that we put online. It's like, where's this coming from? You know, it's like you don't want to build a relationship with me, you know, but yet you're saying that, just like you were saying earlier, you know. So it brings up all sorts of questions. And again, we start to look at what would be the reasons behind that. And there goes the hamster wheel all over again.
Right. I mean, I think the first thing that hit me was, what's his agenda? What does he want? Does he want to reconnect in some way? And now he wants to follow me and have access to my life, but he doesn't want a relationship with me. It's very complicated.
It is, and that's the thing that's unfortunate, is that, you know, if your past relationship was based on bullying, condescending comments, or just an absence in general, then it's like basically you're wondering, like, what's the intention here? Are we going to play out the same thing all over again? Am I going to be experiencing another form of deception all over again if I engage? So I mean, it's a big question, and I think that again, there's all sorts of things that can happen online, especially if people go unchecked when it comes to posting stuff also. I mean, there's lies, fabrications, exaggerations. People can go through all sorts of different things like that. And we have to learn to navigate through that. That's the hard part.
And of course, the question becomes to follow or not to follow, to friend or not to friend, because you friend or follow and you are opening yourself up to their lives again. And are you comfortable with that? You know, a lot of people who responded to my survey said that once they did that, they really felt terrible because they had this sense of all that they were missing. They would see these images of family members who they'd never gotten to know, or they would suddenly become aware of what somebody was doing. So for example, one survey respondent said that she had the weirdest experience where she actually saw that her sister was playing a specific game at a specific moment, and yet they had no contact. So she had this feeling of intimacy because she knew what she was doing at that time, but she couldn't respond in any way.
Yeah, and I get that. I get that too. I think it's unfortunate that we're very transparent with our presence online like this, you know, and yet we still have these walls that are up that, you know, are just it basically feels like a slap in the face with regards to estrangement. I remember the green dot I used to see when I was using some social media apps, and you know, as soon as I would engage and talk with that particular sibling, she would basically just get right off, and the dot would just disappear altogether. So even just the presence or the absence, all of a sudden, you know, how much it can be used as a weapon almost, you know, just to kind of get a one up on someone. It's really unfortunate in that way because we're not using social media the way we should be. And I think that kind of is important that we mention that, because it's kind of leading into the next thing that can sometimes happen, which is the addictive nature of social media. You know?
Right, you can't resist going to see the relatives you have no contact with. So there were many respondents who talked about the absolute pain, but pull of going to look at a sibling's Facebook page and posts. And, you know, and what are you really accomplishing? It's a very difficult thing. Are you making yourself feel better or worse?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a very important question, because these social media apps, they work by the whole reward notion, right? I mean, you're pushing the button, so you get a dopamine rush. You know, I mean, you're happy, and it's like, oh, okay, like you're like that little mouse that's pushing that button to get the treat. You know, so it really is like that. And if we're not careful, you know, we can fall into that trap. You know, and it's the instantaneous gratification that comes with it too, right? It's the idea that you don't have to work at it. Basically, you just click on it and it feels good, and you keep on doing it. And you know, I think that there's always that idea of missing out. It's done in such a way that if you don't consult it regularly, you don't get to see all of the posts. You know?
Well, there's also the problem that, and I've heard this from all sorts of people, not just people who are estranged, but to suddenly learn news that you would have liked to have gotten a call on, like, you know, your niece is pregnant or somebody died, but you get this news on Facebook rather than directly. And it's very hurtful. Again, it reinforces that sense of exclusion.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. It makes it feel impersonal, and you know, it's supposed to draw us closer together. I mean, and there are all sorts of positive uses that we can look into with regards to that. But just the notion that it forces like that separation, it reinforces the whole impersonal aspect of it. That you know, you had to have some other source to get that information as opposed to hearing it from that person. So I think there's always a danger of that becoming like more of a type of grapevine that, you know, can invite all sorts of interpretations, and of course reinforce the estrangement more so because of that in these major life events.
Well, and it can become another battleground where suddenly this is a new way to gain access, and you can be very snarky. And I think that's dangerous because there's a remoteness online, and it's not like being in the same room with somebody and having contact. It's a little more like driving around in your car and feeling completely comfortable leaning on the horn and calling somebody a nasty name. There's a distance.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important with regards to the whole notion of online etiquette, because I think that in some ways we kind of lose track of the idea that there's dangers with regards to social media. The idea that you can just come up and say anything you want to somebody. I mean, we can't do that on the street. It's not like you just go up and say, well, I don't like you for such and such reason. I mean, okay. I mean, that doesn't happen, you know? So that's the thing too. We need to learn, I think, at a young age, how to navigate through all this. And I think that this brings us to our next theme with regards to that, which is the danger in creeping and lurking on people's profiles also, because in as much as we seek positivity, negativity also is something that can incite interest in terms of, well, what's going next, what's going to come up next, what's the next chapter, so so the mind always seeks completion, and we need to be careful with that.
Well, there's another aspect to that too, which is that there's posturing that's going on. And these feeds, Facebook posts, are very highly curated. In other words, that the poster is looking to present a certain image to the world. And so, it's dangerous to buy into all this, that it's the perfectly happy family, because it may not be. It's just that's how the poster is putting up on the page.
Mm-hmm. And that's very true. I think that that's the issue that kind of comes up, and the idea that we kind of interpret that, we fill in the blanks, so to speak, right? It's like a story that's unfinished, and that all of a sudden we start to just add our own interpretation of that. And I think that the whole notion of being stuck in ambiguous loss also can sometimes be something that interferes with that, because when we're creeping and lurking, we're not actually helping to heal ourselves or harmonize ourselves with the current status quo of the relationship. I think that's a very important thing to remember. What are our intentions when we choose to go onto somebody's website?
Well, one of my respondents to the survey talked about how she kept going on and exposing herself over and over again to her estranged sister's life and family. And she finally recognized that she could not properly grieve the loss of the relationship because she kept opening up that wound through the exposure. And so at a certain point, you have to weigh, what are you doing? Is this more helpful or hurtful?
Exactly. So we need to really learn to keep ourselves in check, I think, with regards to this, because even though it feels good, it doesn't mean that it's the greater good. So it's a good question to ask ourselves, I think, is it better for us to experience the small good through that rush of dopamine, or should we be looking at the greater good in terms of not really engaging and not letting that affect us? So I think that that's really important. And I think that kind of leads us to our next theme here, which is the whole notion of having to block or restrict people when necessary.
Well, and I think it's important to think about, when do you block? And in my survey, a lot of people, and probably 30%, said they had chosen to block. It was too uncomfortable to constantly be reminded of the estranged sibling and their life and all that was lost.
It's sad when we have to do this. It's not easy because it's counterintuitive a lot of times. Then you're having to block a family member. Why would you block a family member, not a stranger? But yet, when communication becomes volatile, when social media becomes a weapon, when people start to comment on everything you put on, and like you said earlier, putting snarky comments or just unhelpful, demeaning things that are condescending in some ways, then you have to ask yourself if that person's contributions are helpful or not. And now there's new options that come up with regards to social media. There's restriction lists now that you can put people on, that people use these, especially if they have their bosses asking to be friends, and sometimes you feel a little bit iffy not accepting your boss, but then what do you say? So sometimes you can put them on the restricted list also, and this works well with our siblings too, because restricted lists make that they can't see everything we post, and there's some stuff that we're comfortable enough to post and we feel okay with putting out there, then they can see that if it's public.
Now, there are a couple of places where there is value in maintaining some connection, and that is some of the survey respondents said they wanted to maintain an open profile so that the casualties, those people who got caught in the crossfire, might be able to reach them. So they're talking about the children, maybe their nieces and nephews. They wanted them to be able to reach out because they didn't want to experience that complete family breakdown and that ripple effect of the estrangement.
And I think that that's a great example of something that can be done, I think, with regards to that. The idea that, you can still play an important role, I think, with regards to, being able to have access to some people that are not concerned with regards to the conflict that may be happening or the estrangement, that are not emotionally invested in that, and that would still nevertheless like to have a relationship with you. So yes, there are positive elements that can certainly help us, I think, with regards to that in terms of the roles we can play. And I always like to say, if we can learn to be pleasant or useful, I think that that's a good outlook to have in general when it comes to being able to interact with people. So if we're interacting with family members that we get along well with, then I think that that's a good way of doing so.
I have this philosophy too, Ollie John. I don't deal with anybody about anything beyond meet you here or business like matter of fact issues on texting or on social media. And I have a couple of strong feelings about this. First of all, texts really open yourself up to a lot of misinterpretation. Social media opens it up to a lot of misinterpretation. And so I think it's often best to not go too far into this. I'm very careful about what I post on social media for a very different reason. And I would like to raise this because I think it's important to recognize that not everybody has what you have. And do you really want to make others feel badly about their lot in life? And I'm really careful about, showing trips that I might have had or any sort of personal business, because I don't really want somebody to go on social media and feel badly about themselves.
You know, this makes sense too. I think that again, you're making positive use of social media in this way, and I think that's really really important to be able to inspire people, to bring people up, learn that you can do that through what you're offering in that way too. I think that that's really important, and we can do this with different causes also. I think that if we're online and we're promoting certain causes, I think that that's fine if it's for the greater good of everyone in that way. I think that that's really really important. So I think that that's something that we need to keep in mind also with regards to what we put out and what that can potentially look through the eyes of other people also. So that's a good mindset to also have.
Well, I think it's how you enter the world and how you bring yourself into the world, and social media is an extension of that. And I don't want to be negative. I want to bring kindness. And so I'm really careful about what I post. And I think that's important for all of us to think about, estranged or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Conscious posting. I like that. It's a good term.
Well,
So
this has been great, Ollie John. I'm really glad we had this time to talk about social media and estrangement. It is a very challenging arena for the estranged.
I agree, and I think that this is an important chapter for us to discuss and to expand on, like we did today, because we need to recognize that this is a reality for a number of people, and a lot of us don't know just how deeply this can cut to some people that are experiencing this behind the screen. So, for us to talk about this, for us to bring this out in the open like this, I think is, again, another extension to the work that we're doing, you and I, with regards to the overall message of bringing out the reality of sibling estrangement. And speaking of bringing out the reality, I know that next session is going to be very interesting because we're going to be talking about your book, finally. We're
A long drum roll.
Yes, and we're really going to be getting into it because I'm certain people must be asking, like, what's this book about? We hear about it, but we haven't been talking so much about it now. And I've been wanting to really talk about this, so now we're going to have that chance next time to delve a little bit deeper in terms of what the book is all about and what it brings. So I'm very happy that you're going to be here next time for this room.
Well, thank you. It will be great. And I wanted to have one last thought before we leave the subject of social media, and that is there is no one size fits all. People have to decide for themselves what is the best course of action. And the way you make that decision is you weigh the risks against the rewards. Anyway, I will look forward to talking about the book, and I hope I can answer all your questions. And always great to be with you.
Great to have you here, Fern. Thank you so much for doing this again.
My pleasure.
All right, we'll talk soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.